So these guys shouldn't be hauling out on our shores at all at this age. So any animal, any sea lion that we see at this age, if it's hauling out on our beaches, that is abnormal.
So that size or smaller shouldn't be hauling
Correct.
out at all, except maybe on the Channel Islands?
Yes,
Okay.
yes.
So if it's on the island, then chances are it might be just fine. But on our typical shores and beaches and bars and
Yes.
restaurants, then the chances are it's malnourished and in need of help.
Correct. Yes.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Just wanted to ask the practical question in case.
And if you don't mind,
print anything, print that.
if you don't mind, I can actually add something to that. It is actually a very good question because it usually is members of the public that call in these animals, and they're not experts. They usually don't even know what species of animal it is, which is normal, right? And most of us actually have teamed up with lifeguards, with harbor patrols, with official organizations, and they are usually our first eyes. They go out, so somebody calls it in. We may call the lifeguard tower. The lifeguards walk over and say, yes, this is a skinny animal, or no, this guy is just taking a nap, And so we teamed up with a lot of other organizations to recognize problems.
Yeah. Thank you. So please bear with me. I am going to show you a couple of charts here. This is a graph of our monthly marine mammal stranding response, and it's for the 5 years prior to 2013. So this is before the unusual mortality event began, and this is to give you an idea of what a more typical year looks like for us. It is important to note that the overwhelming majority of animals that we respond to each year are California sea lions, so these lines are very representative of their numbers. So in a typical year, we see the majority of animals coming in between March and June, and this is when California sea lions are normally weaning from their mothers out on the Channel Islands, and that's at about 9 to 12 months old. Here I've overlaid the years 2013, 14, and 15 to show you what the unusual mortality event looks like. And you can see that in 2013, in March, we had a huge influx of animals, mainly California sea lions. And in 2015, we saw this influx even earlier in February. In January of both 2013 and 2015, we saw 4 times the normal amount of stranded marine mammals coming in, again, primarily California sea lions that are weaning prematurely from their mothers. In 2014, that's the orange line, and it's a little difficult to see, but you might notice that it actually has a similar pattern of strandings that are more normal for our stranding location. And although it has a similar pattern of more animals between March and June and also similar numbers, we actually saw reduced numbers of other species during that year. And so these numbers are actually proportionally more California sea lions, and it'll show you a bit better on the following chart. So this is the other chart. We've got annual marine mammal rescue and response. The black line is our annual responses, and a response is anytime we go out to the beach and assess an animal. So anytime we get a call from the public about an animal on our beach and we actually go out there and look at the animal, that's termed a response. A rescue, and that's the bars in the graph, is anytime we actually go out and pick up an animal and bring it back to a rehabilitation facility. And you can see that both the rescues and responses have an overall increasing trend, with the highest increases being in 2013, 14, and 15. If you look at the bars a little bit more carefully, you'll see that they're color-coded by animal species. And the blue is California sea lions. Again, the majority of the animals that we respond to each year. And again, the animal species that has the most dramatic increase in strandings since 2013.
Is it noteworthy, if you could go back to that slide for just a second, that 2011, 2012 look to be like unusually low years, at least as this 10-year period is concerned?
I don't know if they were like...
No, we haven't had an unusually low year. We have had a few more peak years, but they're actually before the graph, and they were not. There's a certain amount of variability year to year, and then also geographically. You know, the profile of animals that strands in Southern California is different than, for example, at North Coast. We get more pups, they get more adults, and so on. So this is probably a regional difference for that year.
Thank you.
Last year, the California Wildlife Center rescued, rehabilitated, and released 25 California sea lions. Expenses to get our marine mammal rehabilitation program up and running included costs of building new enclosures, as well as hiring our new staff and putting in a swimming pool. Here's our enclosure here. We have 3 pens, and then here should be a photo of the swimming pool we put in. And we have a couple of California sea lions here that actually just got introduced to this pool last week. And if you can see, the one in the front actually has a green mark on its head. And what that is our way of identifying the individual animals so that we can make sure that each individual is getting the proper amount of fish. And also, if they're on any medications, we can make sure that the correct individual is getting the medications that are for them. Over the 27 miles of coastline that we cover, we responded to 279 California sea lions last year. Of these, 167 were admitted to rehabilitation facilities and had a chance at rehabilitation. 14 of these animals were euthanized immediately because of severe injury or illness. 98 sea lions that California Wildlife Center responded to, so that's 35% of all of the animals that we went out to assess. And that's only the ones that somebody on the beach saw and called us about. So that there's tons more that we don't see all the time, that we don't hear about. So for 98 of these individuals, there was nowhere to go. Rehabilitation facilities were at their capacity, and they were not accepting any more animals. We were forced to leave them on the beach to die, or in some instances, if there were people or dogs around, we would move them to a safer beach location where they would then starve and die. And that's just, again, the number from our 27 miles of coastline. We all keep hoping that next year will be better, that we'll see fewer sea lion strandings, and each year we are disappointed to see that the strandings seem relentless. We are taking calls on a daily basis, having to tell frantic members of the public that we can do nothing to help the sea lion that's lying in front of them, barely able to lift its head. This little guy here we actually saw while we went out to rescue a different sea lion. And this guy was out in the waves trying to make it to shore. And he eventually made it while we were standing there, and probably was out there for days searching for food. And you can see he's pretty much just skin and bones. His ribs are sticking out there on the side. And he's probably only lifting his head in this picture, honestly, because we were right there, and he was probably a little bit afraid. And this is the condition of the animals that we're seeing out there right now, every day. This year we began rescuing sea lions on January 6th. This is 3 weeks earlier than ever before for us. January 6th is extremely early for a sea lion to be away from its mother. These are 6-month-old babies that are wandering out into the ocean in hopes of finding food because their mother cannot provide them with enough nutrition, or because they have been abandoned altogether. Because of our location in the Santa Monica Mountains, it gets very cold there at night. And so our particular center is a bit limited in our capacity to take animals in the winter. It drops below freezing overnight. And with little to no body fat, these animals would not be able to survive these temperatures. So this year we actually purchased a trailer because we were getting animals in so early. We had to do something to expand our capacity so that we could keep them in the trailer overnight and keep them warm. We also purchased several large heating pads and put a roof up over our enclosures so that we could better work with animals in the rain, and also because on the flip side it gets over 100 degrees at our facility and we needed to give them some shade in those temperatures. We are already hitting our limitations even with the trailer, and it's only March 2nd. We are stressed by the lack of space and resources and trained staff. But if we have these things, we can do it. We can help these animals. We are not battling a disease that we don't know how to treat. We know how to treat malnutrition. We just need the resources to do it. Thank you.
Thank you. So when you've treated and released a pup back into the wild, what are the? Do we have a sense of what that pup's chances are for survival in the wild?
They have done some satellite studies of animals that were treated and released during the unusual mortality event. And I don't know the exact numbers, but the majority of them were successful for weeks to months beyond being released.
Well,
just a couple of closing remarks. We genuinely hope that you're hearing a chorus of gratitude from the three of us representing the organizations where we are, and humbly we're representing those other network members as well. You've also heard the story of a diverse network of centers, very grassroots nonprofits, some mid-sized nonprofits, SeaWorld on the South Coast, a network with a shared mission to do the right thing by the humanity of the work that we're a part of, but to also be led by our scientific curiosity to understand what's going on out in these oceans. You've heard discussion of climate, you've heard discussion of oceanography, of currents, of population trends, and all the rest. We are not those scientists, but we sit on the front line day in, out, watching these animals come ashore, and we're doing everything we can to care for them, to learn about them, and then to share that with those scientific communities that are helping us understand the bigger picture of what's going on out in our waters. There's no questions that we're in for another extraordinary season, and the support that this body brought to us last year was hugely helpful, not only in our work last year, but in our preparation for the work that is ahead. So with that, we're happy to address any questions. Thank you.
thank you. I appreciate that. Can you describe in a little more detail the communication that's going on between the marine mammal scientists and the oceanographic and climate scientists? Because it does appear that all of this is interconnected, and the sharing of information is probably very valuable.
Yeah, I'll lead off and ask if Hendrik and or Lorraine want to add, but using our organization as kind of an example, what we do is focus on the care of our patients, and along the way gather and amass the data that we're privy to, right? We then share it and represent ourselves on working groups. So an individual on our staff is part of what is called a harmful algal working group, a group of scientists from disparate disciplines coming together to analyze and interpret all the data that folks bring in. So we are part of that's one example, part of a broad network feeding into other governmental, non-governmental, multi-stakeholder working groups around fisheries biology, around climate change, around whatever issue it might be. And there's multiple factors, as we all know, impacting our oceans. Does that help?
Yes. Are there other species that you're aware of that are being impacted by some of the same dynamics that are relevant to the work that you're doing?
I would go to seabirds as a prime example, and one that the general media has been attracted to tell the story as well, because as we see our own crashes, if you will, in animals that are starving, they often do coincidentally or on a temporal basis, sometimes ahead of us. We've heard of common murre collapses and the like. I don't know if Hendrik or Lorraine would have anything to add there.
Pelicans have been impacted. Yeah, I think you actually said it very well in the beginning. It's a symptom. What we're talking about today is a symptom of a bigger picture. Underneath it all is basically warm surface waters off our coasts. El Nino seems to be a natural cycle. Whether us as humans or as a species are influencing that cycle or not, I don't know. And climate science is hard to. There's not a lot of hard science. It takes a long time to develop hard science, hard conclusions in climate science. But definitely with the blob, the sentiment is that or one of the leading theories is that the fact that there is less ice on the North Pole in the Arctic, there are fewer northern storms. It's those northern storms that actually usually push the cold water from the north down to our coasts. And so, because there's less ice, less northern storms, this blob that we've all been hearing about in the popular media has been able to develop, just because there's no influx of cold water. And ultimately, that's what drives the sea lions declining, the Guadalupe fur seals, the northern fur seals, the seabirds, and also humans. The sardine fisheries. There's a lot of the food fish species that we rely on have not opened this year or are impacted by it.
Based on the work that you all have been doing, if this trend were to continue, are there concerns and projections and things that you're beginning to think about 2 years, 5 years down the road, and what would some of those be?
A couple of ways I'd begin to answer that, and one is bearing in mind the population of California sea lions off the West Coast, which is somewhere around 270 or so thousand animals. So we're talking about losses and strandings in the low thousands, but we're talking about that over a few-year period. So population biologists that Hendrik referred to and with whom he's worked out on the Channel Islands are seeing a hit to the same age class a few years running. So the cohort, if you will, of little juvenile sea lions growing up into reproductive age is going to be anomalous here in a few years. Will that have a ripple through the population of California sea lions is one thing we think about. With a very different hat on, I sit in my organization and I think, what is it we need to be planning for and prepared for from a workforce point of view, from a budgetary point of view as we move into the future, because the playbook of 10 years ago just isn't serving us well anymore. And we're in a position right now where we create our annual budget with caveats and with triggers that, okay, if we see this by this date, then we know we're going to have to hire temporary dispatchers, temporary technicians, temporary veterinarians. We're going to have to increase our food budget, that kind of thing. So it's a learning period for us from a business management point of view, and it's a learning process from an observation point of view around the population.
So in terms of your business planning, if you will, are there gaps that any of you are aware of along the coast or in the network response that need to be filled?
There's a interesting story to tell there, and one of the most gratifying things about the support that this legislative body drove and this committee drove is the lift that it's giving to organizations like the North Coast Marine Mammal Center, where, again, I mentioned that they have a portion of a full-time equivalent. Well, that was on soft money. That wasn't anything that they could rely on. To the extent that support like this could be ongoing, would be phenomenal for a group like that.
When you say soft money, you mean something else to those of us in elected office. Are you talking about contributions from the public?
And or limited term grants, discrete grants that for this season you can hire a portion of a person, that kind of thing.
I see.
There is you're seeing a great collegiality amongst the network members in California, and there is an awareness that there are gaps in capacity, in physical facility capacity along the coast. Santa Barbara and Ventura counties are going through some changes right now where they are looking to develop, and again with resources like this, greater capacity. So there's more buffering in the system to address what Lorraine is talking about. So there's more hospital beds, if you will. Lorraine gave a great example of how that one organization serving Malibu is able to grow its capacity and has hunger to do more. So yes, there is need. There are gaps. We are collectively, everyone in this room, raising the bar though on what we're able to provide. Would you guys add to that?
I think that sounded great.
And I can second your story. I mean, Lorraine said it herself. Her facility, they were a marine mammal responder, but have now transitioned to becoming an actual rehabilitator. So basically, another hospital was added. A marine mammal veterinarian was added. In 2013, I think all of us were scrambling. We were all very reactive because we didn't know this was coming. And at our facility, we shut down or sea lion interaction programs, and so to bring in staff to move them to these rescue programs. We moved collection animals out of pools to free up water and pool space for the rescued animals. And we flew in staff members from the other SeaWorlds in the country and Busch Gardens. Now then going into 2014, 2015, the network also in general developed a better cooperation and communication with the marine mammal biologists, because they actually knew in 2012 that something was going to happen on the beaches, but there was no real official link, so they didn't tell the stranding network members, which is now one of the results where some of us go out and help them with their field work. So it really has brought a community together, and instead of being reactive and having to shut down shows or exhibits and so on to respond to this, we now have these pools ready to go. We have, in our case, staff hired and ready to pull the trigger, activate as depending on the number of sea lions that come in. So everybody's gotten more organized. The network also has gotten really good at communicating. We used to have 2 weekly conference calls about how are you treating the animals? What do you do? Some of us can afford more diagnostics, more treatments than others, and we could say, we landed on this and this works the best. And some of the smaller facilities were able to adopt those protocols. It has really brought the network together. It has integrated the biologists, and we've all become better prepared, I should say, for a tidal wave of sea lion pups. And like Lorraine said, we all hope it's not going to happen this year, but it is happening already, and it probably will happen again next year.
I had one more question to ask you, and I just forgot what it is. But I know. We've focused mostly on California today, but are we hearing from Mexico and south and Oregon and north of related types of events and circumstances?
So certainly around this issue, if you think geographically, it's kind of born of the Channel Islands and fans out up our coast. So your district and that region is kind of central for where these little guys are landing. Oregon coast, Washington coast, they have response programs just as we do. They just don't happen to be proximate to where these pups are. Mm-hmm. But there are issues on every coast of our country. As Hendrik mentioned, there are 6 open unusual mortality events. So these kind of working groups to assess what's going on, be it with seals or sea lions or small cetaceans as well.
And I can I guess I can speak to the Mexican side a little bit. There is the organization that oversees marine mammals in Mexico is called Profepa, but there is no organized stranding network. There are no official responders. We are not getting any reports. There are, under Marine Mammal Protection Act, you can import a cetacean into the United States for emergency medical care. We do get calls for those, for dolphins that strand in Tijuana, but the California sea lions, we have no idea. If we see what happens on our beaches, this is happening in Ensenada and so on too, but nobody is reporting it. Nobody's responding to it.
I see. All right. Well, thank you all very much for your testimony here this morning. It's been very illuminating and interesting, and we will continue to monitor things by our contacts with you, and hopefully this year won't get any worse, but understanding that it likely will, we will look forward this year to examining again whether we should be supplementing the budget in our proposal. Thank you very much. Thank you all for those of you who are listening in and paying attention to this hearing today. This is a very unusual but important issue in the state of California, not just as it affects these particular marine mammals, but for what it might portend for the future of California and other areas that are affected by changing weather and weather as it affected by climate change. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you.